Shalom and welcome. You're listening to Temple Talk. Today is the 7th day of the month of Shvat. Tafshin Ayin Hey, it's 5775, month of Shvat, month of renewal and growth. It's January 27th, 2015, and the Shabbat, Parshat Beshalach. It's also called Shabbat Shirah. This Sabbath is known as the Sabbath of Song in honor of the amazing section of the Torah portion, this week's Torah portion, that describes the splitting of the sea, the passage of Israel on dry land across to the other side, the famed Az Yashir poem that describes the experience of Kriyat Yam Suf, the great miracle of the splitting of the sea, which is such an incredibly amazing, beyond all description, experience that is basically pivotal, primordial, and essential in understanding, I think, the Jewish mindset, the whole concept of our destiny. And our sages describe in tremendous detail the whole concept of the experience of the splitting of the sea and what it means. And we go into it in tremendous detail on this week's video Torah lesson. Some interesting concepts of the concept of the splitting of the sea. But in the meantime, in this forum, suffice it to say, the concept of the splitting of the sea, obviously, you know, the whole idea of Israel walking through to the other side is synonymous really with where we are in terms of putting our best foot forward, our faith in Hashem, and moving forward, marching forward. The Pharaoh had second thoughts. He decides he's going to go chase after them. Apparently he can't live with them, he can't live without them. And of course, he said they're imprisoned in the land, the wilderness has locked them in. But God said, I'm going to strengthen his heart once again, and he's going to pursue them. And he says, I will be glorified through Pharaoh and his entire army, and then Egypt will know that I am Hashem. So there's tremendous elements of prophecy and revelation of Israel's relationship with Hashem in the splitting of the sea. Like I say, we speak about that this week on our video lesson. And also the idea of the sensitivity of the Jewish women is reflected in a major way in this Torah portion, because even if the men were caught unaware, the separate song that was led by Miriam that we find in chapter 15 and verse 20, where the verse tells us that Miriam, the prophetess, sister of Aaron, took the drum in her hand, and all the women went forth after her with drums and with dances. And she spoke up to them, sing to Hashem, for he is exalted above the arrogant, having hurled horse with its rider into the sea. Kind of the succinct summary of her song. But the idea is, you know, where did they come up with these drums? They had all these instruments there in the middle of the desert. They didn't have food to eat. Their dough hadn't risen. They left in a tremendous haste and tremendous upheaval, but yet she packed along, all the women packed along musical instruments. You don't find such a description when it comes to the menfolk, where it seemed to be more spontaneous, but Miriam seems to have planned it. And of course, this is a very, very deep idea that our sages mention in the context of the oft-repeated principle that the women, Jewish women, are those that really lead us into the redemption. As it was then, so it is now, so it is in the future. And she knew what was coming. And that's the difference. She had such tremendous confidence in Hashem that she prepared in advance, and she had her instrument ready because she was wanting to make sure that she would be able to glorify Hashem in everyone's presence. And of course, the other very amazing thing that we see in that verse is the fact that in the next verse, in verse 21, it says here in this English translation that I'm looking at, it says, Miriam spoke up to them, right? Miriam spoke up to them, sing to Hashem. But that's not what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew says, Vatan lahem Miriam, shiru Hashem. And that actually literally means Miriam answered them. So, of course, obviously, the Hebrew is tremendously potent and laden with all sorts of meaning. So, what is the question? If the Hebrew says that Aunt Miriam answered them, there's no question. What were they asking? So, what does it mean? She answered them. A beautiful idea here, really. What this is alluding to is, you know what? Everybody knew that Miriam was responsible in a way for Moshe, for his rise to power, for everything that Jewish people in the meantime had been going through was essentially her fault, right? Yitzchak, because it was Miriam's inspiration that her parents actually reunited in the face of the pharaonic decree against bringing children into the world. Miriam was a very young girl, very great prophetess, and she criticized her parents for abstaining from being together because she knew that they had to, and because of her urging, Moshe was brought into the world, and everybody knew that. So all along the way, in the meantime, every time the decrees became harsher, and every time Moshe and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they came out, and first he said, okay, now you can't have any straw, and everything that got worse and worse and worse until it got better. They all looked at her all the time, and they said, thanks a lot. They said, whoa, really, good luck with that, oh, thanks a lot, he's really hurting us more than he's helping us all, and she must have gotten that a lot. But this was the moment of her tremendous validation, and everyone saw exactly the strength of Hashem and Moshe's commitment to them, and this was her answer. And that's the idea of Ata'an lahem Miriam. This was her answer to them for all of those years when everyone was doubting. And that's in itself a very beautiful insight. Of course, there's so many different other things that are going on in this week's Torah portion. We could speak for a lifetime about the secrets of the splitting of the sea, but we also have here the beginning of the falling of the manna and the whole idea of the blessing of livelihood, and something that we speak about every year. In fact, there is a Hasidic tradition about today, the Tuesday of the week of Parshat Haman, the portion of the manna in Parshat Beshalach, that today is a day that's very propitious, very mesugal for livelihood. It's a very big blessing to say over today these verses, because the blessing is available today for livelihood, because the secrets of livelihood, which of course is a very great challenge for a person, are all derived from the portion of how Hashem provided for the sustenance of the people of Israel in the desert by raining this manna down upon them, which of course at the time they didn't even know what it was. They called it manna. They called it man, it's in English, man. They called it man because they said to each other, manhu, meaning what is it? Because they didn't even recognize what it was that he was doing. Sometimes Hashem gives us a great blessing and we don't even see it. Also at the end of this week's Torah portion is the attack by the people of Amalek on Israel. So there's a lot going on here, moving at breakneck speed towards the sign of Revelation, which is coming up in Parshat Yitro, and of course the building of the tabernacle. So we're right on schedule. In the meantime, I got to say something. We flit back and forth between levels of reality, and by the way, a lot of that also is what's going on in another teaser here, if I may say. A lot of that is what's going on in the Song of the Sea, past, present, future. And that's what our life is all the time on the background of the Torah portion that we're reading. So I just have to say one thing. We are holding out for something very great. We're waiting for the proper government to arise that will sanctify Hashem's name, that will be more concerned with God's honor than with any other external influence. We're waiting for leadership that is courageous and rooted in the fear of heaven, in commitment to Torah, to rebuilding the temple, to being a light to the nations, to bringing about redemption. And in the meantime, we have what we have, and we do our best with it, and it's all part of the plan. So, occasionally we voice criticism for what's going on and for our own government. And again, this isn't it. This isn't exactly what we're waiting for. We're waiting for much more. But on the other hand, I gotta say, I mean, Netanyahu is no Moshe Rabbeinu, okay? Absolutely not. Netanyahu is not Moses at all. And of course, I repeat, in case there's any question about that, our main criticism is any person, any Jewish leader responsible for the Jewish people, responsible for the governance of the land of Israel, who could possibly consider a two-state solution, who could possibly consider giving away any of our land, the land that Hashem gave to the Jewish people, aside from everything else, aside from every other digression from the plan and lack of faith and problem, but that in itself is the main criteria, right? Anyone who can do that is obviously not rooted in the strength of what Jewish destiny is all about. But at the same time, Prime Minister Netanyahu deserves honor and respect. At times, shows even if it's only a fleeting glimpse, and even if it's not enough for me, at times he shows the potential for greatness and great courage. And he does represent the state of Israel no matter what. I hope he always realizes that. He's no Moses, but he represents the state of Israel. Why do I say all this? Because I can't help but think about the refusal of the POTUS, the Prime Minister of the the President of the United States of America, to meet with him. I can't help but recall the verse that we read very recently, where Pharaoh said to Moses, "I won't see you again. You won't see my face again. The day that you see my face, you'll die." Moses said, "Okay." I mean, it's just the juxtaposition of this whole story now, which is quite a headline story here in Israel. I don't know if it's the same way. Actually, I see a lot of media attention internationally as well. You know that Netanyahu was invited to address a Republican Congress, and he was invited by a Republican Congress to come. I believe the date is March 3rd, where he's supposed to come and give this address. And the address is thought to be that it was going to be relating to sanctions against Iran, which the Republican Congress is in favor of, and the Obama administration is not in favor of increasing sanctions. And Israel, of course, has a very, very major concern with the Iranian nuclear threat. It is not a figment of our imagination. It is not something that is a Jewish neurosis. It is the avowed plan of a genocidal regime that has never stopped talking about destroying Israel in living memory. And for some reason, as their centrifuges increase and they're moving closer and closer towards nuclear power, for some reason the Obama administration is like, that's cool with us. So Israel basically is way out there on its own, and every once in a while we see speculation. We hear about the possibility of Israel advancing a lone strike against Iran, preemptive, because what choice do we have as we've been thrown under the bus, as it were? So in any event, the idea is this. President Obama is extremely irritated with Netanyahu, who he already hates in the 6 years of their relationship, and that's already been manifest, proven, validated time and time and time again in the press. We know how Obama speaks about Netanyahu. We know how he treats him, whether it's having him ushered into a side door of the White House, whether it's being pictured in a carefully orchestrated pose with his feet up on the desk, with the soles of his feet out towards the camera, when he's speaking to Netanyahu on the phone. Whether it's, you don't have to be a genius psychiatrist or brilliant analyst to know basic body language and how obvious it is when the difference the way President Obama receives and talks to and grimaces in the presence of Netanyahu, as opposed to, for example, the delegation that he's leading as we speak right now to Saudi Arabia to genuflect to the mausoleum of the now deceased King of Saudi Arabia, with whom Obama was very, very close, to the point of bowing down before him. That's another story, or is it? But the point is this. So here again, that verse that just comes to mind that we read recently, where Pharaoh said, Vayigaresh otam lifnei paro, that Moshe and Aaron were chased out. They were chased out from the presence of Pharaoh, and Obama says he's not going to meet with him when he comes to America because he's very insulted, because he's very angry, because a statement was made that Netanyahu spat in the face of the administration. Why? By accepting an invitation that was given to him when Obama's not going to invite him. Of course, the Republican Congress is very concerned about hearing this and allies itself with Israel and feels that Israel is an important ally. And so the excuse that was given officially was that neither President Obama nor Vice President Biden nor Secretary of State Kerry have time to meet with him, even though if you go to the official White House website, you'll look at the schedule for those days and you see that they have no public appearances whatsoever. But they were very, very busy. They decided that they can't meet with him. In the meantime, and I'm not talking about the fact that Obama, again, this week, chose not to attend the commemoration of the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, or not having gone to Paris to show solidarity against Muslim terrorism, which he can't call by name anyway, because as far as he's concerned, it doesn't exist, and it's all domestic violence or workplace violence or other kind of things like that, because he doesn't allow himself to say the words Muslim terrorism, because he doesn't believe there is such a thing. And our point being, you may be wondering, our point is this: he doesn't have time to meet with Netanyahu, but he did meet with, how is it pronounced again? Just a second, I don't want to make a mistake.
GloZell Green?
GloZell Green, right. Now, I can't make this stuff up. I'm not that creative, but and apparently everybody knows about GloZell Green because she has how many subscribers on YouTube? She's got like 3 million subscribers on YouTube, and she made one particular. GloZell Green is a comedian. She calls herself the queen or the mother of the internet. She might be a very, very nice person, and I have nothing against her at all. And even if I did, who am I? I mean, who am I in this world? I don't count. But I'm just saying. And by the way, she's been to Israel, and kudos to Aiden, who told us that she's been to Israel and that she is very positive about Israel. So thank you. But GloZell Green, I mean, I can't watch this video because it's not sanua, if you know what that means. I don't want to look at this woman in her scanties. But GloZell Green fills up a bathtub full of milk and FruitLoops. Have you seen this on YouTube, gentle listeners? And she gets into this bathtub, and apparently, I mean, again, I didn't see it all the way through. Apparently, Yitzchak,
she guzzles the
she
milk
eats her bathtub of FruitLoops and milk, I believe, actually on all fours. It sounds pretty disgusting to me. Apparently, it's really something because it's got like 9 million views on YouTube. They call that viral. And President Obama met with her in the White House. It's amazing. And she gave him a present of her trademark green lipsticks for what she called his first wife. I think she meant the first lady. Anyway, it's very, very funny. So he is the leader of the free world. He will not meet with Netanyahu, who is the leader of the State of Israel, who is America's most important ally in the Middle East, if not the world. And the same president of the United States who's completely disinterested in going to Paris or in showing up to the 70th anniversary of Auschwitz, he met with this lady who is, again, she might be a very nice person. I don't mean to castigate her, but I mean, listen, she is famous for filling up a bathtub full of FruitLoops and eating them. So that was his top priority. And apparently he has been meeting with a number of young viral YouTube stars, YouTube personalities, because he, I guess, likes popularity. And he feels that this is a tremendous priority. Why are we saying all of this in this week of Parshat Beshalach, splitting the sea, seeing the hand of Hashem, being freed from Egypt and everything that it represents, all sorts of servitude, all sorts of mental slavery, and all sorts of misconceptions about what the nature of reality is and what's really important in life, right? We have a situation wherein the world is being overtaken by a type of devil worship, by murder, by absolute savagery. The BBC, in the meantime, BBC Arabic division made a directive, it was in a small news item, that they will not even call the Charlie Hebdo attackers terrorists because they can't even use that word. So this whole dismal world is involved in some sort of revisionist history, whitewashing of what's going on now. It's a decline. It's a collapse. It's a march into. If it was into oblivion, it would be bad enough. But it's not a march into oblivion. It's a fall, a decline, a collapse into the insatiable maw, M-A-W, of the cannibalistic, molocheistic. Savage destruction of what Islam is and doing in the world. And the only person at the moment is in the free world, if you'll pardon me, with all due respect and with all due, that's standing up against it is Netanyahu, and he's standing up against it all alone. And instead of giving him the time of day, this is how America is dealing with its public image, its public relations, and its priorities. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, and think about what it all means for the free world and for the struggle of the human image of man created in the divine image to cross the sea and to leave Pharaoh and slavery behind, and to make a statement that there's only one God and that we were created to make the world into a better place. How do you make the world into a better place? By allowing Iran to have nuclear power, and then meeting with a lady that fills up a bathtub full of FruitLoops, or by meeting with the leader of Israel? I'll leave that question open in the meantime. Parshat Beshalach, splitting of the sea, every secret in the world exposed to us. Stay with us. We might share some more. Be right back. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. Today, the 7th day of the month of Shvat, 5775, 27th day of January 2015. Rabbi, we've been talking about Parshat Beshalach, the splitting of the sea, the song of the sea, leaving Egypt behind, and never seeing Pharaoh again, Manna coming down from heaven to give sustenance to the children of Israel. And also the Parsha concludes with the unprecedented and unanticipated and unprovoked attack by Amalek on the children of Israel. Rabbi, you mentioned earlier some outlandish statements made by politicians, and also an outlandish position taken by the BBC. They weren't going to report something as being Islamic terrorist. There's no such thing. I'd just like to read something here that was written up in the Al-Jaminer, and it's referring to a New York Times article which was written about the terrorist who hopped onto a bus in Tel Aviv last week and stabbed 10 people. 4 of them were injured very severely. Fortunately, everybody seems to be out of trouble right now. And Isabel Kirshner wrote the article, and she referred to this terrorist, not as a terrorist, of course, but as someone who lived the, quote, ordinary life of a Palestinian. And she mentions that he was quiet and introspective, yet For young people and others in the village, she writes, they were angered by the war in Gaza and, quote, by recent tensions over the revered Aqsa Mosque. Okay, the revered Aqsa Mosque, of course, refers to the Temple Mount. When she just took this tension there as a given and as a reason for his act of terror, and as a justification, of course, the only tension that is being fomented on the Temple Mount is tension being fomented by Muslims who demand exclusivity in the Temple Mount and who hound and harass and attack Jews who go up to the Temple Mount, as you can see from many things we've posted, including video clips taken by Muslims themselves, proud of what they do in the Temple Mount. But of course, far be it from the New York Times to really check out a story when you can just, write what's given to you. She also mentioned in reference to this terrorist another recent assailant, her words, and that of course was the terrorist Mufaz Hijazi, who attempted to assassinate Yehuda Glick, who for his efforts to promote Jewish prayer in the Temple Mount. And again, he also was agitated by the recent tensions in Al-Aqsa. So
that makes it sound as if there tensions in Al-Aqsa, whatever that means, is being caused by Jews.
Of course it means that. Of course it implies that. And that's exactly what Isabel Kirshner, reporter for the New York Times, was trying to convey. Because why should she seek out the truth when this fits into the narrative?
And to describe that terrorist who took a huge knife onto a bus and just tried to savagely butcher every Jew that he could.
Youth by
He's quiet. He's introspective. Life in the village is just another day. Just another day in the village is what she's saying. She's saying he lived the ordinary life of Palestinian, meaning that they must be just seething because they're so put down.
Right.
And that reminds me of like the Rolling Stone putting the baby-faced Boston Marathon bomber on the cover and making him into like some sort of a
rock star,
cultural hero. And in the meantime, the Muslim and the Arab world is on fire, right? Syria has displaced 3 million refugees, and Islamic Sunni terrorists have massacred other Muslims and tortured Yazidi women and girls, and Muslim terrorists are massacring people in the West, and a Japanese person was just beheaded, and they're constantly beheading, and the world can't handle the fact that Israel,
can't wrap its brain around Islamic terror.
Is in the way. It's very bad that Netanyahu is coming to address Congress.
Something's going on here. And again, there's a parallel between what I'm about to say and our Parsha and recent Parshiot, Moshe in Egypt. And again, was it 2 weeks ago that Netanyahu had the audacity to force his way into the Paris demonstration of solidarity, which nobody wanted him to go to, because again, he's just a reminder of what everybody wants to forget.
Netanyahu being there, walking in Paris is an embarrassment because, oops, you guys have this all the time, and then of course Jimmy Carter went out of his way to say it's because of you that there's any Islamic terror in the world altogether. It's because of us.
Netanyahu is again. You love him, you hate him, you like him, you don't like him, whatever. He's done something which is somewhat unprecedented in modern Israel, and that is he has assumed for himself a role of world leader. He is a world leader. He considers himself an equal among other world leaders. So yes, he invites himself to Paris when he hasn't been invited, in fact, been asked not to go. He accepts an invitation to speak before the Congress. He's not behaving like a vassal state or like somebody's, gopher. And again, Moshe Rabbeinu also had the audacity to stand before Pharaoh and say, this is the way it's going to be. We're not playing by your rules anymore.
This is quite a comparison.
And again, you and I share the same reservations
that it doesn't work exactly.
And again, that we aspire to the same type of Jewish leadership, but give a man due for what he's trying to do, and again, simply for standing up and saying, you can't put me in the back of the bus. I am an equal. And there are a lot of Israelis, certainly those politicians who oppose him, who don't like that at all as well. Just like the Israelites in Egypt were like saying to Miriam, like, you created a monster here. This guy is making life miserable
just like
for us.
they came back to
Pharaoh used
Moshe,
to
they
love
said,
us.
you
He loved
destroyed
us. Now he
our
hates
scent
us.
in Pharaoh's nostrils
right.
because, like, you've upset him now. He won't give us straw.
And so the resistance to Israel, growing up and accepting its role as world leader. I'm not saying the world leader, let's not be arrogant here. I'm just saying world leader. There's no reason why Israel shouldn't be in the front row of leaders in the Solidarity March in Paris, et cetera, et cetera.
First of all, the way that we will become the leader of the world in the sense that we are supposed to be is when the temple is rebuilt and when all of mankind is able to come and make that pilgrimage to Israel and perceive the relationship with Hashem and learn from Israel, as Isaiah tells us. In the meantime, last week, Friday, January 23rd, Secretary of State Kerry spoke at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And do you know that basically what he said was, don't blame the Muslims for their own extremism. He became like a Muslim leader and an apologist and an expert in Muslim theology. Here's what he said. He said that violent extremists who are killing children and others in Iraq, Syria, Nigeria, and other parts of the world, they may cite Islam as a justification, but he said the West should be careful about calling them Islamic radicals. Here's exactly what he said. At the same time that Egypt's President Sisi is telling people that Islam is to blame, and that Islam really needs to be reconsidered and rebooted because it's just on a collision course and it's destroying the world. Kerry, he says it would be a mistake to link Islam to criminal conduct rooted in alienation, poverty, thrill-seeking. I'm embarrassed to be reading this to you, and other factors. Quote, "We have to keep our heads," Kerry said, unquote. I have to stop here before I continue the quotation because he said, how ironic, we have to keep our heads, but actually Islam is taking people's heads off. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that. And I continue quoting, "The biggest error we could make would be to blame Muslims for crimes that their faith utterly rejects." So that is amazing that he is telling us what their faith rejects and doesn't reject, while at the same time they're telling us, no, that this is their faith. Their faith is to avenge the honor of Muhammad and to destroy all the infidels and to make the world into a home for Islam. So there is a contradiction between the United States administration's perception of reality and the reality that Islam claims for itself. And so this collision course, it all comes together and intersects in the vision of the prophets of Israel, the commandments of the God of Israel to build the temple and for the whole world to be able to come there. That's what we stand in the way of, apparently, that's what stands in the way of the entire world collapsing into, as I said, the maw of insatiable Islamic lust for the destruction of everything around it.
So the Western world is gazing at its navel.
And blaming Israel wherever
Self-satisfied.
possible. That's the main thing. Meet with the woman who fills up a bathtub full of FruitLoops and opens up her mouth like Esav and says, "Pour it down my gullet," and other YouTube phenomena, which basically is synonymous with approximately with the level that the world is on right now. And the most important person in the world, theoretically, leader of the free world, the President of the United States of America, won't meet with Netanyahu, who is basically like the thin blade of grass standing in between the total Islamic takeover of humanity, because Israel is standing on the forefront, because everything that Israel is going through, everything that Israel is stemming back, this tide, is basically what's holding up the rest of the world. And everything that we're going through, it's because this is the agenda for the whole world. And in the meantime, again, wherever you can blame Israel, whether it's the New York Times, whether it's the United States administration, it's all the same. It's got to be Israel's fault.
You know, recently some politician in Europe, maybe British, said, establishing the state of Israel was a mistake. Not the first time a politician has said that. But again, this is reminiscent of Pharaoh's, turnabout at the beginning of Parshat Beshalach, where after having finally, raised up his hands and says, we can't take this anymore, go, after the plague of the death of the firstborn, he said to Israel, go, get out of here, I never want to see you again. And then as soon as Israel is gone, he came back to his senses, so to speak, and looked around at his advisors and his servants and his people and said, what have we done? These people who we were living off of, because they were our slaves, and they were our economy. That's who was building this country by forced labor. We let them go. What have we done? And he wants to turn back history. He wants to turn back the clock. And again, right now, the Western world sees Israel as, the instigator of all the Islamic violence, and the Western world seeks to turn back the clock. But you know what? We have already crossed the sea, and we're already in the dry land, the beautiful land of Israel, and they can't turn back the clock. So reality is going to change, and it changes slowly, just as we're reading in the Parsha. Israel's free, and then it's attacked by Amalek for no reason. That sounds also somewhat like current events. Again, no reason, and you make up a reason afterwards why. Islam doesn't have to do any work for itself, because Isabel Kirshner of the New York Times can justify it, and John Kerry can justify it, and the President of the United States can say it's got nothing to do with Islam. Right now, the West is doing all the work for Islam, and Islam just needs to continue to sharpen its blades and move forward. And I guess it's a race against time. Who's going to get there first? But as you mentioned earlier, Rabbi, the real ground zero is the Temple Mount, and despite the fact that some ordinary Palestinians might be agitated by the tension on the Temple Mount is the place of the Holy Temple, and history moves forward, and the future is bright. The Holy Temple will be rebuilt, and that will ultimately pull humanity back on course for better things.
First of all, this whole idea of having been slaves in Egypt and going from the slave mentality towards freedom, crossing the sea to the other side, not looking back. There's so much of this that we need to internalize now, because you were describing about how Pharaoh had a change of heart. I'm releasing the slaves, releasing the workforce, the economy, and everything. The Jewish people have to stop being slaves to others' expectations and to what the world has set us up for as the fall guy. The Jewish people have to be able to march forward. And if you take in as a case in point, the whole concept of what they call the instigation, the incitement at the tensions at the Temple Mount. Absolutely nothing has changed at the Temple Mount, except for the tremendous onslaught of Islamic tension, Islamic incitement, Islamic provocation, and it's all just in the face of the few Jews and others who seek religious freedom, civil liberty, human rights, to be able to move their lips, to be able to utter a prayer to the Creator. Nothing at all has changed. There's no confrontational stance. There's no aggression. There's no attempt to rebuild the temple. There's the idea that how long can this go on, that Jews are not permitted to pray there, as is enshrined by law and as is totally understood. So this is all, again, part of the whole misinformation and revisionist campaign of Islam, to blame the Jews for what's going on and for their own aspirations, for their own takeover. In the meantime, as we report constantly, there is a presence of cells of ISIS and of Hamas and of Hezbollah and of all the terrorist organizations on the Temple Mount, and their goal in subjugating the land of Israel and the whole world to their agenda has nothing to do with the few Jews that are going to pray on the Temple Mount.
Personally, I'd like to invite Netanyahu to speak on the Temple Mount about the dangers of Iran and Islamic terror.
And all that it takes to get yourself on a to endanger your life, to get yourself threatened, and to be marked for Islamic violence, is to take a stand. As soon as you take a stand for something as simple as the rights for the Jewish people to pray on the Temple Mount, or if you take the concept that Jews have been cherishing and praying for thrice daily for 2,000 years, the concept of the rebuilding of the temple, if you take it seriously and you work towards it, then you are marked, because this is exactly what they can't stand, what they can't tolerate, is Jews that are real and that are ready to take them on and that are ready to claim what it is that we're supposed to be doing in this world and march towards that destiny. So that's in itself indicative of exactly what their relationship is to the rest of the world.
Amalek, Rabbi. How does Amalek fit into all this?
Gosh. I don't know.
He just attacked for the sake of attacking, or attacked because, as we always say, he wanted to cool things down and create some doubt in the Jewish people, the children of Israel, to cool their fervor, make them second-guess themselves, make them second-guess the direction that they were heading in.
Well, that all sounds very contemporary. That's certainly an eternal struggle, and that's certainly part of what we face today.
So, as we always say, and I think you opened the show this way, there is nothing more contemporary and real and describing events today than the weekly Torah reading. It just happens week after week. Next week, of course, is the Sinai Revolution, receiving of Torah. So maybe next week will be a good week in the world, Rabbi.
Next week is Parshat Yitro, and of course, Tu B'Shvat falls on Wednesday of next week, but we'll be able to speak about that in next week's Temple Talk. Yitzchak, you know, people might be wondering about the progress on the important and groundbreaking project of the preparation of the architectural plans for the Holy Temple that we were campaigning for last year, last Hebrew year, 5774, from the month of Av through Rosh Hashanah. We had a wonderfully successful Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign for funding the architectural plans for the actual Heichal, the main building of the sanctuary. And we're going to be having some updates very, very soon, God willing, that we're going to begin to post periodically on our website and on the Facebook page, because the architectural firm that is dedicated to the project of preparing the plans for the temple is making great progress, and hopefully we're going to have the entire set ready within the coming months. We'll be able to share with everyone, and we're especially grateful and appreciative of all of those that share the vision of the rebuilding of the temple, that are joining ranks with the Temple Institute and helping us in the research and preparation and activism and education and everything else that the Institute stands for in terms of the fulfillment of Exodus 25:8. And we're very, very excited about the architectural plans. We're going to have something to show our viewers, our listeners, our friends very, very soon.
You mentioned the Facebook page, Rabbi, and we have just cleared 97,000 fans on Facebook, and approaching 100,000, which hopefully will break 100,000 in the next week or two. So Again, grateful to everybody who is a participant with us in Facebook, and it's good to have that audience and that community to share the news and our ideas with. And if you're not active on our Facebook page, then please join us. Be one of the first 100,000, because once we get to 100,000, of course, our next goal will be 200,000.
And we just recently opened the Facebook page in Spanish.
Spanish, yes.
Which is already up to, I believe, over 1,400 likes.
Yeah. So it's a good way to keep up to date with what's going on the Temple Mount, with what's going on with progress toward the building of the Holy Temple, and with what's going on in redemption for all humanity. So thank you very much for being with us this week on Temple Talk.